Hey guys, Purely Awesome Cuber here, and today I'll be comparing all of the Dayan cubes, except for the Taiyan, as the season finale of Clash of the Cubes, Season 6. So on the left here we have the Dayan Panchi, then the Zhanchi, the Lunhoi, the Lingyun, and finally the Guhong version 1, not version 2. And the Lingyun is version 2. So let's start off with corner cutting. The Dayan Panchi can do just a little more than line to line. If you do like 40, try and do 45 or any more, it can pop. It's not really that hard to do though. It's actually pretty easy, like just not quite there, but yeah, so not too hard to do it, but it's very like snappy and clicky, and overall not too pleasant. Reverse is actually pretty good. It's like 3/4 of a cubie, but again, if you try and go over, it can pop. So corner cutting on the Panchi, not too good, but not too bad either. The Zhanchi, keep in mind I have this pretty tight, but it can do 45 with some effort, and a tiny bit over if you really force it. Like, yeah, that just happened. Reverse on this is about the same as the Panchi. Seriously. About 3/4 of a cubie, but it is a tiny bit harder. Not as blocky though. The Dayan Lunhoi, it has about 45-degree corner cutting, but this is extremely blocky and like choppy, I guess, like snappy. And it does it sort of easily, but you do have to force a little. Anything under that though is fairly easy. Reverse cutting is again about 3/4 of a cubie, but it's very hard to do on the Lunhoi. The Lingyun has terrible corner cutting because it's so tight, but it does a little under a cubie for regular, and reverse is like 3/4 of a cubie, which is surprising, but it's very snappy and everything. And as for the regular cutting, it's very hard to do, like you see. The Guhong is an interesting case. I don't know what's wrong with this, but its corner cutting is about line to line, and it's very like gummy and hard to do, and it's like falling apart almost. Reverse is about a little under half a cubie, which like sucks. It's like 1/4 of a cubie maybe even. I don't know what's wrong with this Guhong, but it's very like gummy and just like flimsy and terrible. In the comments, tell me if you guys have a Guhong version 1, and if you do, if it's like that. So overall, the winner of corner cutting for this, I would have to say, would be the Dayan Zhanchi, which will most likely be the case with everything else. As for turning, the Panchi is very like snappy and clicky. Like, you can hear that. It's just like, even when you're just turning it like one side, it's still very clicky. This cube's not very smooth. Take out the clicks and everything, it probably would be smooth, but because of that, it's not really smooth at all. Yeah, overall, it's just not too pleasant to turn this cube. The speed is fine. It's actually a little on the faster side, I would say. But it's not, I don't know. It's just not very pleasant to turn this cube. No offense to Dayan. The Zhanchi, however, is, well, is slightly less clicky. While still being clicky, it's more pleasant to turn and not as like in your face loud and stuff, right? As for the speed, it is fairly fast, but not too fast to the point where it's uncontrollable. And it's not too slow, which is a big issue with this cube, the Lanhoi. This cube is very gummy and slow. It did come pre-lubed from the factory, I think, but it's still very annoying and hard to turn, kind of. Like, it's definitely not as easy to turn as some of the cubes we have nowadays. It is very smooth, though. That's probably because they lubed it, but yeah, it's not too bad with this cube. Like, the speed is terrible, but the actual feeling is not too bad. The Ling version 2 has very, like, extremely bumpy and, like, crunchy feeling, sort of. And it's extremely loud, as you can hear, like the Banshee. But it doesn't really feel like the Banshee much. It's more like bumpy and crunchy, whereas the Banshee is, like, clicky and snappy. This cube is extremely fast. It could be uncontrollable for some, but I don't really find it uncontrollable. I kind of like it. Yeah. The Guhong, like I said before, mine is very flimsy and slow and unfortunately terrible. That's basically all there is to it. Now for popping and locking. The Banshee can lock sometimes, and it can definitely pop when you're excessively corner cutting. But during just regular solves, it doesn't pop too much. Now, it does definitely pop more than most cubes, but it doesn't pop too much to the point where it's like every other solve your cube explodes on you or something. And the locking isn't too bad. It catches every so often, but not too bad. The Banshee, I find this rarely ever pops, except for the center caps, but I have it kind of tight, so that might be the reason. And as for locking, it rarely ever catches. It's actually pretty good with that, but it can catch sometimes, as you can see. The Lanhoi can pop, but if you're talking about like a piece completely coming out, that's kind of rare, because if you watched one of my challenge videos, you can see that the pieces come out like halfway, like that. And that's because they have two notches here, and when it's popped out halfway like that, it's just this comes out and this is holding on, so that's why that happens. But other than that, it doesn't really pop much, and even that doesn't really happen during regular solves. As for locking, it's a pretty fluid cube, but you can manage to lock it up sometimes. The Ling Yan version 2 doesn't pop on me because I have it very tight, but I have heard a lot of things about this cube popping a lot, which is part of the reason why I've kept it so tight. As for locking, even though the corner cutting isn't too good, and the tensions are very tight, it still doesn't lock too much. Now, of course, it does catch a good amount, but not as much as you might think. The Guhong is, well, it's my Guhong. Yeah. So overall, the winner of this huge comparison, I would have to say, like most people would predict, would be the Banshee, with a close runner-up of the Lanhoi and the Ling Yan. Then I'd say the Banshee and then the Guhong, but I don't know what regular Guhongs are like, or if they're that bad, because people say they're that good. But yeah. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.